are in with the pharaohs. They're being given tracts of land, you see, and dominion. They actually help the pharaoh in certain wars that they were having. The kings of the Scythians are given tracts of land, and one of the kings of the Scythians, called Miel, actually marries Akhenaten's daughter, Scota, from which Scotland gets its name.
Okay. Take that again for us.
Right, so here what we're talking about is when the Scythians are resident and being privileged visitors in Egypt, the records basically show you that one of their kings, Miel, who was very loved by the pharaoh, married the daughter of Akhenaten and Nefertiti, whose real name is Meritaten, right? They had 6 daughters, you see, and about 4 of them died of a plague. And Meritaten, like Nefertiti, vanish from the face of the earth.
Okay.
They don't die, but they just vanish.
Right.
And suddenly they're there, and the next minute they're not there. But again, in Irish Celtic mythology, it's all known. It's all known where Meritaten went. I can take you to her grave. It's right there in Ireland. You know, we go into this in the book. So, and her nickname was Scota, from which Ireland was named first. And then because Irish people moved to Scotland, Scotland got its name from the Irish settler Scota.
Oh, okay.
Or Scotia.
Yeah.
Right? Scotia's, in Scotland, they don't call her husband Miel, they call him Gadelis.
Okay.
Or Gadalas, like Gael, like the Gaelis, right? Gathalas or something like that. You know, it's like the Gael. But of course, in Ireland, in his own lands, in Spain, he was called Miel. So these Atnas basically start moving about within 600 years BC or 1,000 years BC. They start moving out of Egypt. And why it's so important is this last wave of invasion is because I track these Scythians, these Gaels, to the Atnists. I believe they were one and the same. And this is where my work differs from everyone else that writes on this subject. This connection has not been made.
Right.
It's in the ancient records that the Scythians were connected to living in Egypt during the time of Moses. We have quotes that even say that. Yeah, we have a quote here from James Parsons. He wrote a book called The Remains of Japhet, being historical inquiries into the affinity and origins of the European languages. This is a book written in 1767. So the 18th century writer, James Parsons, says that the Scythians carried on their learning and philosophy long before there were any Greek schools.
Okay.
Right? So the earliest writers knew this. We have from Geoffrey Keating, who wrote one of the first histories of Ireland back in 1809. His book was translated, although I think he wrote in the 1600s. His book was finally translated in 1809. He writes that Hector Boetius, in his History of Scotland, says that the Gaedalians, or the Gaels, were in Egypt when Moses was working wonders in that country for the delivery of the Israelites. And the Book of Irish Invasions agrees with that computation.
There we go.
Right.
Yeah.
He is clarifying for us that the Scythians and the Gaels were in Egypt, but when in Egypt? You know, I've claimed that the Irish were in Egypt from the earliest times, from the way before this. He is confirming that even in the days of Akhenaten, in the days of Moses, at the time when almost biblical history is beginning, we have the presence of Scythians, we have the presence of Gaels. You see?
Interesting.
There's a connection right there. And it's a very important one because these boys accompanied Akhenaten's crowd when they left Egypt and started, immigrating towards the west.
Yeah.
In these migrations that brought what I call Atanism, and what British Israelites refer to as Israelitism or Judaism or Christianity to Ireland, to Britain. People, I think, my work is there to try and assist people to understand that once you realize that when you're saying words like Judaism, Israelitism, Christianity, if you just make it simple and say Atanism from Egypt, lots of things in history are going to start making sense.
Yeah, it connects a whole lot more, I guess,
yes,
in
it
that
does.
sense.
I have a quote from a guy who wrote a book, J. Hutchinson Cockburn. He wrote a book called Church Life in the time of St. Blaine. So he was writing on Scottish history, you see. He says that the Celtic Church in Ireland and in Scotland owed its origin not to Rome, but to Egypt. There is no doubt that the Celtic Church owed its ritual, its architecture, its worship, and its law to Syria, Egypt, and Palestine, and that its allegiance to Rome was slight. Now, this is incredibly loaded. Very, very important. Of course, what he doesn't tell you, because he doesn't know, that yes, it's true that the Celtic Church, that means the Christian Church, the early Christian Culdean, Milesian, churches in the earliest days of Christianity, he says are influenced obviously by Egypt.
Yeah.
What he doesn't know is that Egypt was influenced by Ireland in prehistoric days.
Via the Scythians or Scythians?
No, long before that.
Long before that,
Through the original Druids.
Okay.
Before this later conquest we're talking about happened.
Mm.
You see, they are all dating these Egyptian, elements, buying into the west to east movement.
Yeah.
But this east to west movement did happen. He's right. Of course it did. But it happened in much later days.
Afterwards.
Centuries afterwards. So they're only talking about the birth of Christianity. So when you're studying the history books, this is where you can be fooled. If you're studying most history books, they're going to be talking about historical days, the early days of Christianity's birth, and the people who birthed Christianity. And they're going to tell you that those elements, those symbols, those ideologies and tenets and theosophies and theocracies and even the characters are migrating, emigrating, being transplanted from eastern countries like Palestine, you see, in Egypt. They're willing to accept this. And then moving in and colouring the complexion of British Christianity. It's actually the reverse. When you go further back in time, that all the elements that returned to Ireland, that's what they did. They returned.
Yeah.
Remember in a previous show we were saying that all the ancient inhabitants of Ireland had to forcibly leave because of the earth catastrophes during the so-called age of catastrophe.
Yeah.
The Scythians, who are known to have occupied, you see, Turkey, right, and the steppes of Russia, literally Scythia, their own country, right, which is closer to Russia, Eastern Europe and Northern Europe. These Scythians, if you trace it all the way back like I've done, are Irish.
Yeah.
They're part of the group I'm talking about. The Gaels are part of the group I'm talking about. The Celts are part of the groups I'm talking about. People who in the earliest days already occupied England and Ireland, migrated across the land bridges at early times, settled in these European, zones, influenced Egypt, influenced Crete, influenced the Greeks, influenced the Romans, the early Romans, influenced the Etruscans, the Mycenaeans, and even got as far as the Indus Valley. Forced to do so because of the upheavals, you see, that struck the Northwest. So if, like we said in the previous program, if these characters then, for one reason or another, in ages later, start migrating back home, or let's say to the land of their ancestors, to the seat of learning, it's a return. That's the word that needs to be in neon lights. So when the Scythians are accompanying, when Miel, you see, and his forefathers and the Atnists are moving into England, we have to understand they are only coming back to the homeland. That's in fact why they were seeking out the far western lands of England. And for instance, why would the Atnists want to go to those remote places?
Yeah, exactly. Well, we have the idea of resources, of course, but we'll come to that later.
That's right. So we said earlier on, they make a beeline for the lands that they knew already.
Yeah.
That they all knew that was loaded with wealth. Not only was the seat of great learning, but was also the place where the mineral wealth existed.
Yeah.
Because now they were going to enrich themselves. But there's one key point that we've omitted, and that is this. As we said, the Atenists were an aberration of sun worship. They were in complete and utter rivalry to the Ammonists of Egypt. Now this opens up a very important point. From the earliest days, and I mean from 10 to 13,000 years BC, I believe the megalithic Irish, the original Druids, like these characters that were dug up, as I said, these blonde, tall Westerners, the disciples of Horus, they had been friendly. These were the Druids of Ireland and Scandinavia, had been on very, very close related terms to the Ammonists we spoke of.
Yeah.
Now, their history of their liaisons and their collaboration, you see, I believe, is going to be another page of history that's going to soon come to light.
Right.
And I hope my book kickstarts this again.
Interesting.
But don't you see the connection? Don't you see the logical follow-through? If the Atenists are rivals of the Ammonists in their own country of Egypt, they certainly can't be friendly with the Druids of Ireland.
Yeah, that's right.
By being enemies of Ammonists, it goes without saying that they were enemies of the Druids. Well, the myths confirm this because as soon as Miel and his Atenists get to Ireland, they declare war on the Druids.
Right away.
Instantly, right away. The very first thing happens.
That's interesting.
The very first thing. In fact, they're not only declare war, they're very rude. The 25NOV2007 sent 3 of their goddesses, their queens. These are the queens of the 3 kings. The Druids did everything in Trinity, you see.
Okay.
They believed in Trinity more than anything else. So they even had 3 kings sit on the throne. At the time of the 25NOV2007, at this period, the kings were situated in Derry, which is in the north, not Tara. I mean, they had kings at Tara. The Iberians had kings at Tara. But the Danann at this particular juncture had their kings, I think, were situated in Derry, which is a corruption of the word Dwar, or Druid.
Ah, okay.
Derry, D-E-R-Y, was originally D-A-R-Y, or D-A-R-I, Dari.
I see.
We get the word door, D-A-U-R, Daur, right, from Druid.
Yeah, interesting.
You only have to go and look at the stones at Stonehenge. What do they look like? Those ones with the lintels on the top.
Yeah, it's a sun door, a sun gate.
Exactly. So and you find them all over the world.
Yeah.
You find that exact same shape in Bolivia and in Americas. You find this strange shape of the two stones with one on top, looking like a portal or a doorway. Well, I mean, they were built by the Druids, and one of the meanings of the word Druid means doorway. But rather than getting off into the tangents, we realize here that the three kings sat there. They sent three queens to meet the Milesians as they landed. And the Milesian kings, some of were extremely rude to these goddesses.
Right.
Like, we're going to take your land, what the hell, get out of our way kind of thing. And so they were had antithesis. They were adversary. They were not favoring the matriarchy. Which brings us to the whole point of Atonism being a very masculine. It was the precursor of Christianity. Better believe it. Their own words in the ancient myths show this, that their antipathy towards the goddesses, these queens, their antipathy towards the Tuatha De Danann, their antipathy towards the land, their belligerent conquest, you see, with war. They could have cohabitated, but they didn't. They took over. Shows you that this was a patriarchal group, fitting very closely with the Hyksos you see on the Atonists of Egypt.
Yeah.
It's classically proven. Once you see the dots are connected, this makes sense.
So again, they are returning to Ireland to both absorb the knowledge, but also kind of exterminate that people to get the idea that they are the keepers of the knowledge. They are the ones who came up with this idea, not the Druids of Ireland, right?
That's right. And their antipathy would have been based on the fact that the Druids would have been cousins of the Ammonists.
Yeah.
Well, they're just getting away from those guys. They hate those guys. Now you're coming to another land, and the land is there for your taking, except for one problem. The Druids aren't your buddies.
Yeah.
They think you're a bunch of Luciferians who worship the dark side of the sun. You're not a pantheistic group, you see, who has a clue.
Yeah.
They're looking at you as you're deranged, and they know you're coming, and they know you're powerful. So, and of course, we're talking about myths that have been written down already pretty distorted because they were written down by monks. But yet, even in that, you can still see the real story unfolds. The Scythians who came with the Atonists already had their ancestors had been living in Ireland, I believe. This is not accepted by most scholars, but I believe it 100%. That all the Gaels, Celts, and Scythians originally lived in Ireland and had been displaced by the age of catastrophe. Then the land bridges sunk, and so these guys hung out more in Europe. But the special thing about the Scythians is that they are a glue, they're a connector between the time of the Atonists of Egypt and the decline of the Druids. So let nobody be under any delusion that this act of conquest was nothing benign whatsoever. It wasn't the seamless, charming, we're all welcome with open arms. Absolutely the opposite. But of course, these characters have written history, so of course they're going to let you know that. They're the winners, remember?
Yeah.
How can the dead get up and say, excuse me, we have a problem with that story? They've been slaughtered, they're all dead. There's nobody there to tell you the truth.
So were the, Atonists installed in Ireland when the Christian era began, the first very, monotheistic sites in Ireland?
Well, this is the central question that is so crucial. Not when it began. As I said, they had arrived with the Scythians. Some people say 600 years BC. Others say about 1000 BC. Akhenaten's reign was about 1400 BC. So this movement wasn't overnight. The Atonists, who came to the West, did so over a period of several hundred years.
Yeah.
This is, again, and the dates, are pretty difficult to work out because everybody's got a different date. But somewhere between the fall of Akhenaten's empire, his reign, and then his daughter's life, you see, in King Miel, at this point, somewhere within that 400-year period, these fellows move back to Scythia, then they go to France, Spain. They have a big settlement in Spain. In fact, most scholars track them back to Spain.
Okay.
Spain features very largely in the story because it's from Spain that as the story goes, one of the kings, Miel or whoever, spotted Ireland